Hello, my name is Juan Manuel Soria, and I am an IT 184, and I will be covering lean implementations in agriculture. So, first of all, I'd like to cover the definition of lean. For those of you who aren't familiar, the definition of lean is that according to ASQ, American Society for Quality, lean is defined as a set of management practices to improve efficiency and effectiveness by eliminating waste. The core principle of lean is to reduce and eliminate non-value adding activities and waste. What is waste? So there are 7 wastes. This is otherwise known as MUDA. This is the defects, overproduction, waiting, overprocessing, transportation, inventory, and motion. Defects range from anything from the product itself having a defect on it to it being damaged. Overproduction is just it goes hand in hand with inventory. Waiting is just between processes, any time in which you're waiting. Overprocessing is making your process a little more complicated than it needs to be. Transportation being the forklifts, any material handling. Inventory just being the amount of space you're utilizing and inventory that you're keeping, which could in turn be defective. And then motion, which is uh, your the way that the employees move and the steps that they take in order to get their materials. So agriculture, according to Oxford, agriculture is the science or practice of farming, including cultivation of the soil for the growing of crops and rearing of animals to provide food, wool, and other products. We should be familiar with agriculture because industrial technology is part of the ag department. But one thing we don't realize is that agriculture is a very crucial uh, topic here, especially where we live in the Fresno. We're the heart of agriculture here in California. Waste within agriculture. So there are 5 reasons for food waste on the farm, according to Heather Barnes. So due to the first one would be food safety rules. And due to some of this food safety rules, some of the fruit that falls on the ground cannot be harvested. So when we have people out on the fields and they accidentally drop a piece of fruit, because of GAP, which stands for Good Agricultural Practices, the harvesters are not allowed to actually put that into the crop. So to sell. It's against food safety rules. Some of the other wastes are included in weather. So weather can destroy crops. Orange, oranges here. We've had this a few years back, where oranges we had a big freeze. It was very cold during that time, and then if you have one cold night and it freezes your oranges, um, it can destroy a whole crop. So this is a big issue for farmers. It creates a lot of waste, and this isn't just like for overnight freezes. It's also along with any natural disasters, as we saw in Florida with the oranges over in Florida. So damage, um, damage is a big issue too, especially nowadays. So we actually, since we harvest a lot, and we use a lot of harvesters machines. Um, this also leaves a lot of damaged fruit and crops. And this is really bad because it creates a lot of waste, not just from things that are being crushed and left on the field, but it's also carrying on some of the damaged fruit into the bins. And so if you put rot into the bins, this will create more waste in terms of rot. So any fruit or crop that is rotting within the bins, usually if it's damaged, it will rot a lot faster, and that rot or the mold will begin to spread. Usually with oranges, for example, the mold spores, those become very powdery, and they actually um, attach themselves to some of the fruit that's not necessarily molding quite yet, but it'll speed up the process. Lack of labor. It is very common here in California for the lack of labor. We noticed the labor costs coming up as well. So that essentially the farmers and agriculture is paying a lot more for labor, and even then they don't have enough labor to actually fulfill some of their demands and some of their harvesting. And the fifth is consumer. Consumers are extremely picky with the sizes and the look of the crop. Any small little blemish on any fruit or vegetable will definitely be uh, looked at by the consumer, and they might not choose that fruit, and then it's just uh, the consumer being very picky. Um, and a lot of the farmers actually make some of their picking choices. They base it off of the consumers' demands and their needs. They want to fulfill the needs. So reducing waste. So in agriculture, what exactly can we do to reduce our waste? So I put the first bullet point: machine upgrades. So machine upgrades that leave minimal waste is ideal because it may be a larger investment than a regular harvester. So, like I said earlier, a big thing about machine harvesters is that it leaves a lot of fruit behind, and that fruit that's being left behind is essentially waste. And and some of the fruit that is being harvested is damaged. So, upgrading our machines and improving the specs and the machinery that goes to it and making it a lot more efficient and causing less damage to the fruit will be a huge upside for our agriculture. Handpick was the second one that I put on this list, and I put this on here because um, although it's not going to be a farm favorite, as obviously we said before, there's a labor shortage at the moment, and this will just add on to the cost of harvesting, but this will reduce the amount of waste. Having someone handpick it or have a robot handpick it will make the waste reduce the waste a lot, and this will help make some of that fruit become less damaged. And then they also have a better way of looking at the fruit, and especially when you have a human that's using their eyes, they know what to look for on the fruit, the blemishes, or whether or not it's just ready to pick or not. And this kind of leads to what I'm the next bullet point, which is schedule pick. So you want to schedule a pick to when the crop is ready. Some of our farmers they decide to pick a little early, and some of the fruit's very small and it's not quite mature, and that's because um, they want to get the higher prices because the demand is high and supplies are low. So they try to be the first ones to pick, but in reality that just hurts us because it's a lot of waste that's being thrown out. If we can schedule a pick and then to when the crop is ready, you'll get bigger the right size fruit, and then there'll be much less rot if instead of picking too late, because some farmers as well, they pick too late in order to get some of those late supply when supplies are low and demand's rising because the season's out, it's out of season already. they also wait, so that causes a lot of rot. So moving on to the next one, inform consumers. So informing consumers is also a very important step that will allow farmers to sell fruit that is scarred or has light blemishes, um, so that they can sell some of that smaller fruit and larger fruit. Although some of that goes to juicing, we the blemish that can be instead of being juiced, it can be used as actual fruit because it's the same thing, even though it has a small scar on it. And then the last one is to find alternatives, alternative uses for waste. So whether it's just using it as compost or fertilizer, it's just uh, we should find different uses for some of that waste. So agriculture, continuous improvement. So there's a lot of continuous improvement happening here in the agriculture. Um, so the first one I wrote down on the bullet points is planting trees closer together and pruning thinner helps reduce the water usage and also improves the quality of the fruit. Stone fruit requires blooming at times, and this is the process of removing the blooms, which this makes the tree have slightly lower yield, but it increases the size of the fruit that is making uh, which will if you lower the yield, it'll increase the size, which is where usually the consumers are very picky about the size. So it'll allow you to fit that consumer size range that they look for. The next one is seed varieties. So the varieties are extremely important for the success rate of the plants. So many farmers they spend a lot of money on this because it's important to have a seed that has a very high success rate. Because if you plant a whole farm, a whole crop, and you have let's say a 50% success rate, well, now you have to go and rework 50% of the crop, which is time consuming and costs some money. So obviously you want to be lean and you want to just do it on a one pass, if not a second pass, but only do 5%. The next one is cross species. Cross species. This method is commonly used by farmers as it allows a plant to have a different peak season than the other plants of the same variety. So this usually is made in order to like fulfill some of the demand during the off season or in the before season. So during the off season, and then it helps also provide for a higher profit yield. Since it is an off season, there's less supply for a certain crop, and you're able to sell your crop at a higher price. Pesticides. So that's the next bullet point. It's also important because it'll help reduce some of the rot and diseases that the trees may acquire from pests that feed on the crop or the tree itself. One big issue with this is that um, pesticides have gotten a really uh, bad reputation. Usually, when you hear pesticides, it has a bad negative connotation on it, and this is because it's just been attributed to pesticides. We hear a lot about the Roundup weed killer that is right now in a court case that it's known to cause cancer. So um, a lot of the consumers are now scared of that, and so they decide that they want to choose an organic crop or crops that are grown in a pesticide free environment, and that's one big thing that will be continuously improved in order to get some of that negative connotation away. So genetic modification, it also has a bad connotation that is attributed to it. People do not realize that it's just as safe as crossbreeding. Genetic modification has mostly given us the benefit of higher yields with more resistance to certain pests and then some also genetic modifications have also gone as far as making crops more drought resistant, which is extremely helpful here in California. So multi-liter system. This is actually a system that some of the farms here in Kingsburg are starting to implement. This is more of a um, lean implementation in agriculture that's actually been spreading. And so this system, as you can see by that image off to the right here, it removes some of the branches. So it's not as deep and it doesn't take up as much space. So it removes some of the branches. It does produce lower yields, which is one of the cons. So the drawback of the multi-liter is that it does involve poorer yields in the first 3 to 4 years as the tree completes its formation. And then once it's established, this system actually performs better than the older system, the spindle. Um, and so some of the pros of this though is that it does remove some of those, shortens the limbs, and then it also provides for easier picking, which is the tree is lower, so you don't necessarily need a ladder to get to the top. And then also it allows some of that fruit to be a little lower on the tree. Um, it also it, it also allows for better spray coverage. It's shorter and arrows, which is way better for tunnel spraying, and it also reduces drift and uses less spray material when you do spray. It also has a dense tree population, so again, it'll in the long term it will help with some of the yield, and it'll also use some um, you have water. You're using that water a little bit more efficiently, and it's also more ergonomic and safe for the people who do pick it. Here are my sources. Here's the first page of my sources, and then here is my second page. Thank you very much for watching my presentation. Hope you enjoyed and I brought some information that maybe you have not heard about before.